This video discusses the Orico M2 NVMe SSD 40 gigabits per second, Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, USB 4, 3.2, 3.1, and so on, combined with the Samsung 990 EVO Plus SSD 2 terabyte. You can see both of them are on pretty good discount right now. What I wanted to do is I have a bunch of devices and I'd like to be able to transfer files from device to device, especially at the fastest speed available for those particular devices. So this enclosure should run at all of these speeds and formats at bandwidth. The Samsung 990 EVO is a cost-reduced 990 Pro, I guess. The difference between the 990 EVO and the 990 Pro is that the 990 Pro has cache and I don't know, maybe 150 megabytes or gigabytes. Well, it has a lot of cache, and so when you write to it, the writes go into that cache and fill it up while it writes to the SSD itself. So what happens is, if you're doing a write that's smaller than the cache, it goes to the cache very, very quickly, and then that gets written to the SSD in the background, but it feels really, really fast. If you fill up the cache, then it slows down to just regular SSD speeds. In general, for copies, the cache makes a huge difference in write performance. So this is kind of a cheaper version. These types of SSDs usually use system RAM for workspace. And kind of you get what you pay for. But the thing is, this was just to transfer files around, so I don't need super high sustained performance for it. One thing about this enclosure, I ran into a problem. Copying 40 gigabytes at a time can result in it disconnecting. I suspect that that's due to heat. This thing does get fairly hot. I have an OWC1M2 that is a lot bigger. It's just like a big chunk of aluminum heatsink, and I have not had any problems at all with that, but that thing costs a lot more. So again, this is cheap. I don't plan to generally copy 40 gigabytes at a time. And so let's go have a look at the results I got from playing around with this. So here's the EVO Plus and this enclosure, the Orico USB4. This is, I don't know, you could call it Thunderbolt 4 or Gen 4 USB. These are the machines I tested with. In this case, these are the same machine, but these are different ports on the machine. The SSD is 2 terabytes throughout all. So first is the M1 Pro MacBook Pro. I got about 3,000 and 1,700 read-write. This has USB Thunderbolt 4 ports. It's generally the same as a Studio. On my Studio with an OWC1M2 with a Samsung 990 Pro, I get 3,000 and 3,100. So this is pretty close on the read. For some reason, the write speed on this is a lot slower than the read speed, and I suspect that that's due to the cache. If we put the 990 Pro in this, we might actually get something like this. But it's probably better to look at the read speeds on this rather than the write speeds, because it was a cheap drive. So this is either running at USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4. Now, the iMac Pro is a special case. The iMac Pro has Thunderbolt 3 and USB 3.1, 10 gig. You would think that something that supports Thunderbolt 3 at 40 gigabits per second would also support USB 3.1 2 times 2, which is 20 gig. But the iMac Pro, the 27-inch iMacs 2017, 2019, 2020, and the Thunderbolt 3 MacBook Pros, which ran from about 2016 to 2020, don't support USB 3.1 2.2, 2 times 2. So the best you can get out of the Thunderbolt 3 ports is typically 10 gigabits per second. And in some cases, it's 5 gigabits per second. I think some people found with the M1 Apple Silicon Macs that they could only get 5 gigabits per second out of what were Thunderbolt 4 ports. They will run Thunderbolt 4 at 40 gig, but if you're using USB, you get 5, which is a pretty big disappointment because there are a lot of really cheap enclosures that support 3.1 Gen 2 or 3.1 Gen 2 times 2, and you would hope to get 10 or 20, but sometimes you don't. So I was looking for something that would get the best out of this, and as you can see, I got 2377, which is about 20 gigabits. The USB side doesn't support that, so I'm getting this through Thunderbolt 3. If you look at what I got with, say, an Orico, I was getting speeds under 1,000, like 898, 498. So getting 2377 is a big step up from here. So what I found is the Orico supports Gen 4 USB, but the iMac Pro doesn't support USB 3.1 Gen 2 times 2. So it negotiates at 3.1 Gen 2, which is 10 gigabits. I was hoping that, the Acasis supports Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3, and USB 3.1 Gen 2 times 2. I think it supports 3.1 Gen 2 times 2, but for some reason when I plug this in, it dropped, it didn't pick up the Thunderbolt 3, and it dropped to 3.1 Gen 2, or 10 gigabits per second. So this was pretty disappointing, and I returned it. So this enclosure is nice because it allows me to use Thunderbolt 3, whereas this one didn't allow me to use Thunderbolt 3. It dropped down to USB 3.1. And I think it's kind of a problem with enclosures in general, where Thunderbolt 3 may work or it might not work, or it might drop down to USB. And for the most part, it's trial and error, or you need to find someone else who has that exact enclosure, and preferably the exact same hardware, who can test it and tell you that it works or it doesn't. One other thing is, these vendors can produce slightly different versions. Like Acasis makes like 4 or 5 different versions, slightly different from each other. And one might work and one might not. So you have to be really specific on what you want to test out, because it is frustrating. One little comment you'll see on Amazon with a lot of enclosures is that this is a frequently returned item, which means people buy them, they try them out, they don't do exactly what they wanted to do, so then they return them and they try something else. It's a pretty frustrating way for product discovery. So moving on. So the iMac Pro, I'm extremely happy with these read speeds. And the write speeds are pretty good too. This thing definitely beats 1324, it definitely beats 498. If I really cared about write speed, I could just get a 990 Pro, but it's not really an issue. So I tested it on an i7 10700 USB 3.1 Gen 2, which is 10 gig. And as expected, it got me about 1,000 megabytes per second. This is a 2020 build. It's PCIe Gen 3. Let me find it up here. Yeah, and the internal drives, the read speed is 3472, the write speed is 3146. It actually has a second NVMe and the speeds are similar. These are, I think these are the limit of PCIe Gen 3. So this is to be expected. There is actually a Thunderbolt 3 capability on this system, but you have to get a Thunderbolt 3 card and you have to wire it to a specific internal port on the motherboard to get it to work. And I imagine the card costs $70 and it's not worth it. On this machine, this speed is fine. On a lot of my various old flash drives, you can kind of see the numbers you get with these older devices. Even a Samsung T3 only runs at 400 megabytes per second. This is the Lenovo Yoga. The Lenovo Yoga has 2 Thunderbolt 4 USB4 ports, and as you can see, I get 3829, which is, I think, 30 gigabits per second and 541. That write speed is kind of awful. It also has a USB-A port that runs at 3.1 Gen 2, which is 10 gigabits per second. As expected, it runs 1000 and 1000. It's possible that there's a balance issue between these two. I do not know why you have this really high speed here and this really low speed, but when you run at a slower bandwidth, you get a balanced number. Not that it matters. For the most part, running at this speed is fine. I'm just more likely to do writes using one of these machines than this. So it also has a USB-C format port with USB 3.1 Gen 2 times 2, which is 20 gigabits per second. And as expected, you're getting pretty close to 20 gigabits per second read. So this is kind of a video if you want to try and get something to move large files from one machine to another, different types of machines, different types of ports. This is not a bad enclosure to go with a relatively cheap SSD. There are probably more expensive enclosures that do as good a job, but you'd have to go trial and error finding them.